allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning and welcome, everyone. And, welcome, everybody. Our first meeting actually being streamed online, starting this year. So, all right, first item on the agenda for our organizational meeting is election of board chair and vice chair for the year. With that, I'll turn it over to our administrator, Mr. Cadwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there any nominations for the position of Chair of Hubbard County Board for 2022?
I'll nominate Ted.
Is there a second on that nomination?
I'll second.
Are there any other nominations for Chair of the Hubbard County Board for 2022? Are there any other nominations for Chair for Hubbard County Board for 2022? Are there any other nominations for Chair for Hubbard County Board for 2022? There being no other nominations, I would say the nominations are closed. Do you want to have a unanimous motion, or do you want to actually just have a recorded vote? All in favor of Ted being chair for 2022, say aye.
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 Thank you all. Are there any nominations for the position of vice chair for the Hubbard County Board for 2022?
Could nominate Tom.
I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair for Hubbard County Board for 2022? Are there any other nominations for Hubbard County Vice Chair for 2022? Are there any other nominations for Hubbard County Vice Chair for 2022? Hearing no other nominations, would we take a vote to approve Tom as the Vice Chair for 2022? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Passing of the gavel.
Hope you have to use it as often as I did.
Okay. Do I now take over, Jeff, or?
One other thing before you go. I'd like to just make a comment here. I had a chance to, at the department head meeting the other day, and I just want to make this public. I wanted to publicly acknowledge some of the great things that this team has accomplished this year. Many of them were not very easy. I'll just quickly run through a few of them. The measured and appropriate response to Enbridge construction. The transition to the administrative model, which was no small feat and went quite smoothly. Transition to Tyler, which is in process. We're now embarked on a strategic planning effort that's in process, a capital improvement plan that's in process, Vouchtail project planning that's in process. There's been several IT updates, a lot due to remote work. Pay equity compliance and classification study, short-term rental, ordinance development, pandemic-related adjustments throughout the year, and of course, distribution of CARES and ARP funding. I think it is a testament to what can be accomplished with a clear vision and a team that is dedicated to serving the needs of the county. Personally, I'd like to thank everyone for making my year as board chair smooth. Department heads and administrator and the administration are the ones that do all the heavy lifting. They are the players on the field, and they deserve a lot of credit, virtually all of the credit for all these things that get accomplished. And I know the county board really appreciates their efforts. These are exciting days to be part of this team, and I enthusiastically look forward to 2022 and Ted's leadership.
So thank you. Okay.
And then yes, Mr. Chair, you would carry forward.
Alrighty. Next on the agenda is the Hubbard County committee list updates. I guess maybe this is where I'll have to send it back to you, where we've got the Hubbard County Standing Committees. Can you kind of explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Mr. Chair, we have We have a lot of tech going on, so I'm gonna be playing back and forth a little bit. There's a couple of changes in the way that the committee list is organized this year from what you're used to seeing in previous years. And the first inside page shows splitting the committee lists up into different sections. The Hubbard County Standing Committees are a proposal, and there are several items in there. This means the combination or the continuation of several ad hoc committees, or a place for ad hoc committees to go rather than to need to exist. So I'm proposing that we would have a single labor negotiations committee rather than having multiple labor negotiations committees. From my perspective, it's less effort for me. It's more consistent through the negotiations. It is more work for the two commissioners that are assigned to that committee, rather than having to be involved in there. And then the General Government Committee would be a new standing committee. We would establish, once we identify who the members, 2 members for each of these standing committees, then we would identify a standing time for the meeting to be there. That would be, at one point, it would be the Finance Committee, the Budget Committee, the pre-planning for that. Pretty much anything that doesn't fall into the other 2 committees, being the Personnel Committee or the Public Safety and Transportation Committee. So those would be the proposed 3 committees. The negotiating committee is only in the years where we're actively negotiating, which 2022 will be one of those years. And the Department Head Committee is another one where we would have commissioners assigned, or assigned commissioner, and then the rotation of the other ones through. So that's a significant change. The Hubbard County Employee Committees are the next thing on the list. And these are like internal committees. I think that's the ARPA and the capital planning are standing ad hoc committees, continuing from last year. Everything else on here is carried forward. If I've got it in the wrong spot, let me know. The AMC standing committees I separated out because it's just easier to take a look at them that way. And it's also when we, after this meeting, and we confirm the standing committees for that, I'll send that off to Lori at AMC, and then that'll be our standing, and that's how you get your communication for the year based on that assignment. And then the other committees are the committees essentially that we serve because they serve a purpose in our community. Some of them we may have some responsibility over, but typically these are committees that the authority for originates outside of the county, but we have representation because we've been invited. So that's how they've been reorganized. Second, we did not have a chance to put many edits in. We put in the edits that we received from people over the course of time, but we know that a lot of the items and a lot of the standings in here are old. What I'm primarily concerned about and thinking about changing is that we would only list commissioners and key county staff in these committee lists, and that we would take the public portions of these and put that in another document. So we would show the full committees for those public-facing, like this child protection disciplinary team. We would only list the county's authority on there, and we would have, that's not really our committee. We participate in it, but so we would do some additional modification to this. So what I would propose is that we would have conversation with the commissioners to identify if there are things that are changing, if you're aware of changes that need to be done. We could get to the point of voting on this today, or we could defer it for another 2 weeks and work it through and share updates with Denise and make sure that we have a clean copy to vote on the 18th. But essentially, this is the committee the list that I would use to approve per diem requests and travel requests for the commissioners. It's also the list we share to the public for accountability purposes, so they know where they can find you and how you're serving them, aside from here at the board meeting. So,
I guess today I'd like to discuss it a little bit. Perhaps bring it back to the work session and maybe kind of do some of the final tweaking and then final approval on the second meeting of the month here, board meeting. Speaking personally, I don't know how my fellow commissioners feel at all. I always liked the go-to commissioners that we had. It gave me an opportunity to get to know the department heads better, plus the commissioner that was with me at the time of the go-to meeting, I got to know them better. I don't know how the rest of you folks feel. I look at the Hubbard County Standing Committees where we have, 15 departments, and I don't know if we get them all covered in those 5 listings here under the Hubbard County Standing Committees. And I don't know if there's anybody, I know that there's a couple of committees that I would like to be on, but I don't know, like I just talked to Shar this morning here a little bit about how I feel good about the committees that I'm on. I feel the majority of them that we're doing something good for the people, and those that I don't feel that way about, I'm trying to change so that I can feel good about them. Does anybody else have an opinion on any of this?
I will add that, I think the general purpose of going to the administrative model was to become more effective in managing department heads, and I don't think the go-to commissioner model effectively does that because we're part-time people. We're not here every day. We're not working with department every day. And now that we're to an administrative model, I believe that the committee structure would be the better way to go. It doesn't preclude the commissioners from having individual relationships with every department head. That's expected. That should be part of our role, to have that, and also to specialize in whatever your interest areas are. You would still do that on a consistent basis, but the day-to-day management, the go-to model, to me it was painfully obvious it didn't work very well. It was a necessary thing to have to do, and it was the best choice for the model we had. But now that we're an administrative model, I think standing committees is the way to go, and let every elected commissioner have a relationship with each department head on an individual basis.
Yeah, I agree with David, and that's where I kind of like this department head committee meeting, to where like we have been doing, we rotate through it, and that gives us a chance to meet with all the department heads. And we can build relationships that way, and then of course see how you do it on individually too, on your own. So yeah, I do agree with you on that.
Yep, and that would be, part of this process with the committee assignments. If there's something that, you want to try that's different or something, I think everybody would probably be open for shaking up committee assignments a little bit. So if you want to experience something different or dabble in something different, that'd be great too. I wouldn't have any issue with that at all. I think that's healthy, matter of fact, to be switching up committees every once in a while.
For these other standing committees, I think there's 4 of them, so I count 8 positions. That means each of us can be on at least 1, 3 would be on 2. Are we going to work that out today, or for the work session?
Mr. Chair, in the interest of time, I think further discussion should take place at the work session.
Okay.
And prior to the work session, I will email Denise and Jeff, just my they're just housekeeping changes that I didn't get to you prior.
Yeah, thank you. And Mr. Chair, if I could add, the standing committees would have the additional department heads as needed as something comes up and falls into that item. Ideally, I would probably suggest eliminating the department head committee as a standing committee from the commissioners, but I know that in the transition from the go committees to the administrative form, that I think it's really serving the board well, and I think it's serving the department heads well to continue to have commissioner representation at that meeting. So I intentionally left it on this year instead of saying I'm going to put an asterisk there and say I'm asking for this to not happen. But I think that Commissioner De La Hunt also said exactly what I would say, that doesn't preclude each of you from having a conversation or a relationship with each of the department heads or any of the staff. This is a small community. We want people to be able to approach anybody on that. And the final thing I'd say about the standing committees is the agendas and the minutes of the standing committees would carry forward and be included as a regular item on the work session, so that you would see the work in the committees that you're not a part of, even when you're not there. and elements from those standing committees would carry forward to the work session. Work session then typically becomes the committee of the whole, where the things that are in development in committee get carried forward before the full board decides they're ready to go to. So the process doesn't change a whole lot, but that's one of the formalities of it, is with the standing committees and making sure that each of you are understanding what's going on, that we carry the minutes of those standing committees forward and add them as attachments to the work sessions. Even if we don't have anything to bring forward to the work session from that committee, you can still see what was discussed at that committee meeting and ask questions if you have them. So that's one of the ways where everybody gets to be a part, even though everybody doesn't get to serve on all the committees. And yeah, with the three basic committees, in my experience, typically the board chair does an extra heavy lift and typically participate in more than one committee. But that's not necessarily the same. So I think it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of stuff in here that's a little bit different. There's a lot of housekeeping that needs to be done. We do have a long agenda today, so if everybody wants to take a look at this and bring it forward, I'll put it on the agenda for Tuesday at the work session and approval on the 18th, if that makes sense. But if there are more comments now, that's fine too.
Mr. Chair, I would also suggest that, if commissioners have a particular committee or they'd like to change something, that they share that with Jeff and Denise too prior to the work session.
Okay.
A little bit of legwork can be done, organizing it, and seeing what it might look like then.
Okay.
We'll take whatever we get for changes or housekeeping or cleaning or formatting, and we'll redline it so that you can see what has changed relative to, and we're getting a lot of comments from the department heads too. This was shared with them, so they're helping us with the house cleaning.
Okay.
Well, then I'd say we'll table this and bring this up again at the work session. I guess this next week then, if you want to maybe be on a different committee or something, and there's currently, of course, a commissioner on it, if you want to reach out to that commissioner, kind of give them your thoughts so that they're not blindsided on the work session type of a thing. And then, like you say, that with these new committees, the Labor Negotiation, General Government Personnel Committee, Public Safety and Transportation, if you want to think about if you want to be on one of those, and how you might fit in, and we can discuss that then at the work session.
A wild card that might come up too is, I don't know how far the Crow Wing One Watershed One plan is
That
gonna come
could
this
be,
year?
this is the year they were gonna organize it, yes.
yeah.
I thought about that too, that in 2022 is when we talked about, I know what the Soil and Water and
Yeah.
some of the other committees have been.
And I know you're on Mississippi and you're
I'm
on
on
Leech
Leech,
Lake.
yeah.
And then
with-
they're alternates.
Yeah, and then with Crowing, so, maybe be thinking about if anything needs to change or if we need to just appoint a new person or what. We can make that work.
I live in the Crow Wing watershed, so if
Yeah.
I was gonna be on one of them, I'd prefer that one over the Leech River one.
And that's what I was kind of thinking, it might be the case, and one of us, Shar, Dan, or I could take Leech Lake then and move you on to Crow Wing.
Yeah.
So we just be thinking of that stuff too, because that's probably gonna come up.
Okay, yep.
Some of those major committee assignments, be thinking about whether, as our terms expire, whether we run and aren't reelected, or whether we choose not to run. It would be important to be able to have someone that would know what's going on in the board. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yep.
Yeah. Because I know prior to, like when we were considering, before you three were on the board, what we were gonna do with the One Watershed, One Plan, there wasn't a consistent person that was able to attend.
Okay. And I noticed, I think it was the park boards, there came a question, Tim Humphrey, he's at large, his position ended last year, December 31st, 21. I did have some discussions with Tim. He's interested in retaining, staying on that committee, but also because of a county park being in their township, they were gonna look for that information that he wouldn't be a term, that there would always be somebody represented from Fardin Township on that Parks and Rec Board, committee, because they have a county park in their township. So that's one thing. I don't know if Mark has any more information on that, or.
Yeah,
It's a cooperative park. It's part township, part county. And apparently there was an arrangement made, well, at some point in time, we can't find any documentation. But that Farden Township would always have a member on the park board.
Okay,
And so that's how he was appointed to the park board, rather than an at-large member. So we may have to change our park board bylaws.
okay.
We're still looking to see if we can find any documentation on that, but so far we haven't found anything.
Okay. And I guess if we don't find documentation, I think it's a good idea if we've got I know we have a county park in Lake George also.
Right.
So if maybe we make some kind of changes or policy or whatever, so that word verbiage or whatever is down somewhere. I like the idea anyhow. So we'll discuss this all more then next week. Okay, next on the agenda, I'm gonna butcher this one. Giziibii Resource Conservation and Development Association 2022 request for support. Jeff, do you have more information on this?
Well, first, as I understand it, you got the pronunciation just right, so, so I think you're perfectly fine. This is a request that we got from them to ask for $300 annual dues from Hubbard County and to appoint somebody to serve on their board. I am familiar with this in the fact that Monoman County Board participated in this and found value in that. I didn't follow the agendas very closely to know the specific business and how that would apply to Hubbard County. So what they're asking for is a $300 approval and the assignment of somebody to the committee. And if you feel that's useful, then do that. And if you feel it's not useful later, then next year we just wouldn't.
Okay. And that was, I guess, you kind of just said what I was thinking is, not knowing this organization, do we test it out for a year? Do we have somebody that might be interested that has some knowledge on, it seems to be more leaning towards forestry and stuff like that, that would be willing to be our representative on that association? And then after a year's time, kind of see what we feel about it, if it's helped the county. I always feel the more the merrier, the more resources we have, the better it might be for us. That's my feelings. I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
I was just wondering what kind of projects they're currently working on that would be beneficial for the county. I do know, I'm being on the SWCD Soil Water Conservation District Board for the past 3 years now. They have, each year of those years, they've received a request from Giziibii, and our local SWCD declined joining them, saying they didn't feel there was enough benefit from it.
Okay.
So that's why I'd kind of like to see more about what projects they're working on right now.
We have until January 31st, they ask, to be returned and completed. Could we have Jeff reach out to find out what they're currently working on?
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
So a plan, project list for 2022 would be helpful for reconsideration in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
How busy is the work session scheduled for January?
Busy.
So do we need a motion to table that, or can we just have a consensus?
I'd make that motion. Table.
I'll
it
second
to
it,
the end of the month.
Commissioner.
The only other thing I see they serve Lake of the Woods, Beltrami, and Monoman right now. So the questions I would have, do they align with our goals of what Hubbard County is seeking to accomplish in the next decade? And then, is there any more value in participating in more when we're already we have Heartland Lakes Development Commission locally, and we have the Headwaters Regional Development Commission, so on water conservation do some projects. Can you spread yourself too thin where you're not focusing your efforts on maximizing? I don't know the answer to that, but that's one of the concerns I would have.
And the other thing,
Thinking
and
about-
one more organization that we're involved in, the Minnesota Rural Counties,
Okay,
is addressing agriculture and forestry also, so I'm assuming from what Dave said, this is more on a local level, but it'll be interesting to see what they say.
I'll try to bring enough context.
Okay.
all right. Thank you.
So,
Oh, so all
Mr.
those-
Chair, yes, we had a motion and a second,
All
so
those in favor of tabling this till the 21st?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? All right, thank you. 2D, schedule of board meetings for 2022.
Mr. Chair, we continued the schedule of the first and third Tuesday for the regular board meetings and the second Tuesday for the work sessions. It was pointed out prior to the meeting that we will likely have a conflict on December 6th again with AMC. But I just suggest that we approve the calendar as it is and make that adjustment once those dates are actually finalized.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve.
All right, thank you.
I'll second that.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those
Aye.
opposed? Motion carried. Set the minimum county attorney compensation.
We have one item, 2E yet.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, the 2022 meeting procedures and bylaws. I kind of wanted to skip that.
Mr. Chair, this has really been amended only for housekeeping and terminology, switching from coordinator to administrator. It includes the updated dates for the board meetings. Everything was relatively carried forward. I think it presumes some information relative to standing committees. The only substantive change was the change relative to having summaries of board meetings available the day after the meeting. With the new iCompass agenda management system, the minutes are attached to the next meeting, so they become available when the next meeting's agenda is published in draft format. I don't know that there's a way that we could do that 2 days later. It's typically done, the board chair and the vice chair have an opportunity and the board have an opportunity to review that, but it's publicly available when it's attached to the next agenda. So that procedure change is included in here as well. The decorum, everything else has been carried forward. Nothing else has really changed.
Okay. Yeah, I read through it and I didn't even see those changes that you made, talked about. They seem standard procedures. Any further discussion?
I'll move to approve.
Alrighty. Dave or makes a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Tom seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Alrighty, now on to 2F. Minimum county attorney compensation.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, by statute, in an election year for elected officers, we're required to publish a minimum salary for the elected positions. So this is a resolution adopting the minimum, and as we talked about setting the salary at the last time, this would be the minimum as based on the new classification system and the pay grid for 2022.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Alrighty.
And then-
G, set minimum county sheriff compensation.
And I've since learned I can put these on the same resolution, so in 4 years I will. But for now, we would need a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you.
Sorry, Tom.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you.
And then, Mr. Chair, as far as I'm concerned, that's the organizational meeting for this year, and we would continue with the agenda for the regular meeting, beginning with number 3, agenda approval. And if I could, want to add item 7D, a resolution regarding adoption of the merit system, or our replacement of the merit system. This is kind of the final step, and we've received approval to move forward with that and completely separate from the merit system. This process was started a year ago. Anyway, Gina will explain that, but to add 7D to the agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda as amended.
This is Ted, I'll second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, now we're up to public input. Is there anybody here that'd like to give some public input this morning? It doesn't look like that. All righty. We'll move on to number 5, the consent agenda. Is there any discussion, or can I get a motion?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Alrighty. County employee recognition.
And then, Mr. Chair, did you want to continue on with reading the recognitions for the
Yes.
meeting? Okay.
I was just trying to bring it up here. Alrighty, for the county assessor, we have Sam Lively transferred to the full-time position of a assessment technical specialist on January 3rd, 2022. Thank you, Sam. Social services, we had Elijah Bushi began the full-time position of transit dispatcher on December 27th, 2021. Jennifer Loud began the part-time position of transit driver on January 3rd, 2022. And Nicole Lund began the full-time position of social worker child services on January 3rd, 2022. All right, next on the agenda is human resources.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. The Human Resources agenda before you today, the first item is the personnel policy, section 5C1, is starting compensation for a social worker. We have, in accordance with their personnel policy as stated, to approve compensation for a social worker, children's services applicant to be placed in the compensation grade range at step 4 due to long-term prior experience upon recommendation of the social services director.
I know that we've had to get good qualified people, we've had to tweak the system to get them hired.
Mr. Chair, this is a policy that I'm suggesting that we review and we'd probably bring to the Personnel Committee for review and discussion. We can make this adjustment, an administrative adjustment, if we develop a policy and the board approves that, moving that forward, so that each one of these doesn't have to be approved by the board. Makes this a little faster, but for right now, the policy is what it is.
All righty, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Dave.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that a second.
Thank you, Dan. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you.
The second item on the agenda is a personnel policy amendment, section 29, currently nursing mothers. The request is to approve amendment to the Personnel Policy, Section 29, Nursing Mothers to Nursing Mothers and Pregnancy Accommodations Policy and language provisions. This was a legislative change to this Minnesota state statute. So it is a requirement by law, was effective January 1st of 2022. So we're updating our policy. The policy statement that's been updated has been referenced to state law. That is the reason and the provision with that. The amendment within the policy eliminated process and procedure, not to be, held within a policy. We will handle that internally, the processing and the procedure. So we've basically got it down to the statement of the policy provision as provided by state law.
Jeff, do we need a motion then on this?
We would, and one of the things in tying our policy to the state statute is that we will have to adopt a policy that says by reference any statute that we have, we automatically follow that statute as it's modified. We don't have that in there. This is a step towards that process.
All righty. Is there any further discussion?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Shar. And Ted, this is Ted, I'll second that. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay. Thank you. 7C.
The next item on the agenda is an informational item to bring before you. This informational is regarding the mandatory COVID-19 vaccination or testing and face coverings emergency temporary standard. The Minnesota OSHA, actually as of yesterday, did adopt in reference the federal OSHA mandatory COVID vaccination or testing and face covering emergency temporary standard as written or equivalent standard that is as effective as the federal. Per Labor Council, the county is under no obligation to implement this policy as of now. The Minnesota OSHA indicated they plan on adopting the emergency temporary standard by reference as soon as January 3rd. So as I stated, they did indeed kept that timeline and did that yesterday. The United States Supreme Court has scheduled oral arguments to consider whether the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals made the correct decision in dissolving the previous stay on the ETS. So as informational to you, depending on those timing and guidelines as well too, we'll place the draft policy on the January 11th work session to review and discuss for adoption the required Minnesota OSHA standard. And we will have that distributed with the agenda or to you in advance as well too for review and for discussion on the work session.
Thank you, Gina. I was kind of wondering about that myself, if yesterday was the date, if we were all supposed to be vaccinated or tested, and how that would work here. So we'll have more on the
So we'll
work
have
session.
we'll have that all laid out within the policy.
Good, thank you. Anything else?
No, on that item. Then I do have the 7D that was added to the agenda for approval this morning regarding the resolution requesting adoption for merit system certification. The resolution that was provided and presented to you was drafted by Labor Council. And the background, over a year ago, December 15th, 2020, the board authorized the Social Services Director and myself to begin the process to withdraw from the Minnesota Merit System. Throughout 2021, I've worked with the representatives of the Minnesota Merit System as part of the certification process. The Social Services Director and myself received email, letter communication late on Thursday last week afternoon, certifying us as a merit system based county. So the recommendation here to finalize as the last step in this process is to adopt the resolution whereby Hubbard County meets the federal standards for a merit system of personnel administration, and that Hubbard County Human Resources will administer a personnel system in compliance with the applicable federal statutes. So the request is for a resolution, and that resolution then will be forwarded to the Minnesota Merit System as the final step process.
Is there any questions or discussion?
I know we've been working on this for a while, and it's all ready to go, I guess, so definitely I'll make the motion to approve.
Dave made the motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Any more discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. All right.
Okay,
Thank you, Gina.
that is all I have. Thank you.
Highway and survey.
Good morning. First on our agenda, we've got review and approve final payment for project SAP 029616007. This is our CASA 16 bridge replacement from last year. Everything's in order, paperwork is back, and we're ready to make payment.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Yes, Mr. Chair, second.
Thank you, Dan. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
And item number 2, we got review and approve quote for security cameras and key card access at Public Works. This is something we've been working on for a while. We did obtain 2 quotes. It's quite varied, but the low quote came from Pro Custom and Security out of Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. $63,848.76. This does include both the card access and the cameras, roughly about a 50-50 split on the cost, with the second quote coming from Sauk Rapids significantly more. And I think that the big difference is you can pick out cameras that are very, very clear, maybe a little bit overkill for what we need for it, but that's probably the biggest difference in the pricing of it, being the cameras was almost 3 times the cost difference for those bids. But I did also include in our packet here kind of the layout of what the cameras would look like for the internal and external. It gives us a nice coverage, and then of course the key card access would be really nice that we would have some type of a system that as keys or key fobs would be lost, you can still manually set those so that they're either active or not active, and we don't have that ability right now without changing locks. If we lose keys, we have keys out there that can access our building, and when our building was renovated in 2000, the locks have not been changed since then, and we have many different keys, many missing keys, so.
Well, I noticed on the images that we have here, it doesn't look like there's any camera covering the front door.
Yeah, and so I asked the consultant about that, and so the cameras that are on the corners are supposed to be 270 degrees, and we'll make sure that they are. And I think when they put this drawing out there, they put basically, that's to show kind of the length range on these cameras, but for the front door, that should come all the way around on a 270 degree from that corner.
Okay.
I did ask that same thing.
What's the color scheme? What does that mean? Is
That
blank?
has, there's other pages in their quote that talks about the different styles of camera.
I didn't catch that.
And I didn't include that. That was, I've got the information for that, but that's, yeah, it's just a different camera, whether it's a bullet camera or a 360 degree or a 270. They have different ranges then, so those are different. If you see on the east side of our building, towards the fuel facility, those will be 2 bullet cameras that'll be set specifically at each set of pumps out there. So they'll actually reach further than what it's showing there, but they'll both be directly out there. So the schematic is not perfect, but it gives us an idea of what our coverage will look like.
Any further discussion? Can I get a motion?
Yes, Mr. Oops, excuse me.
Go ahead, Dan.
Mr. Chair, Judd, would you be looking at, or does this include the Nevis station as well, and also on the north end, or
Not
will
at,
that be coming in some time?
yeah, not at this time. This is just for the Park Rapids location. We will also be looking at that at some point, and I would guess that that'll be part of the in the strategic planning for the capital improvement plan.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Tom. A second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Dave. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried.
And item 3, we've got review the 2-year option for liquid calcium chloride contract. Last board meeting, we gave a presentation on the calcium chloride and the DuraBlend. And as part of that, I did mention that what we've been doing for the past few contracts is offering up a 1-year followed by a 2-year option, and it's actually worked pretty well for pricing. Our pricing has been very nice compared to our neighbors, whether that has anything to do with maybe the quantity that we put down or just the location and the amount of hauling that's required for it. But at this point, with only 3 cents a gallon up for 2022 and 2023, it would be our recommendation that we do exercise that 2-year option with them. And then we're locked in. It's nice for budgeting purposes, and it is a good price.
And with the current inflation's going the way it is, we never know what is gonna go up and how much, so.
Right, and this gets us away from, having to go back out for bids and whatnot, and I don't foresee that we're gonna see any difference in price, so yeah, I agree with you that the fuel prices are kind of volatile, and these are good pricings.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Dave. A second? Is Ted all second? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
That's all we've got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Natural Resource Management.
Good morning.
Morning.
First item on the agenda is a request from the Park Rapids Lakes Area Chamber of Commerce for a letter of support of the January 29th and 30th Heartland 200 snowmobile race. I did talk with the Forest Riders Snowmobile Club regarding this, since we are their sponsors. And they are in support of the race. They do have concerns that racing through the woods kind of is counterproductive to what they've been trying to, teach their riders as far as safe riding in the woods. But they do agree that this does, bring light to the sport of snowmobiling, and they're also in favor of that. They are overall in favor of continued support of this race, so I did provide a draft letter of support for your review and approval.
Yeah, it looks like they're taking the steps that they can to try to make it safe. Trying to have everything north of Highway 34. I could see where that could be a problem, trying to cross that road. I was kind of wondering if Tom and Dave are going to be joining this race. No?
No.
I don't know, have
Those
enough
days are
horsepower.
No. I will say, as somebody who's actively involved in it, they really do a good job of getting the information out. I don't know what else they could do to get the information out any more than they do. And the operation of the race, the company that puts it on, they're fantastic about following up, making sure people's driveways are fixed up or cleared, making sure there's nobody left on the trail, making sure everything's picked up properly and groomed after the race. So they really do a fantastic job, and it is a real added benefit, I believe, to the community to have this event here.
I agree.
It's one of the most popular races on the circuit because it's one of the few places where we have enough trails and we have enough things to be able to actually have a through the woods race, and the drivers absolutely love it.
And we have snow this year.
Yep.
So. All righty.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Shar.
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carried.
Next item on the agenda is the discussion of some potlatch land north of Emmaville by the Trust for Public Lands. They have some Lessard Sam's dollars that are available that were going to be used for the purchase of the sheep ranch for the DNR. But as the DNR is taking a little bit of time to look at their acquisition as a whole rather than parts and parcels. So this money is available, and Bob McGilvery from the Trust for Public Lands asked me if there was some parcels that we had in mind. We did look at these parcels. There's about 600 acres north of Emmaville along County 4 and down along County 24 that ties in with some existing tax forfeited lands nicely. It also provides a connection between, for the snowmobile trail, which is also the proposed route of the Itasca Heartland Spur connection between Emmaville and Itasca State Park. One of the issues that we would have with this is that the Western 40, the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council looks very narrowly at using Lessard Sam's dollars for acquiring land that will be used for recreational trails. So we would probably want to take a look at that westernmost 40 or everything west of the existing snowmobile trail to be acquired through other means. But the remainder of those parcels, Lessard Sam's, or the Trust for Public Lands is prepared to acquire from the Conservation Fund and donate those to Hubbard County. Understand that the county will not receive PILT dollars on those, as those would be considered county fee lands. However, the county would be able to retain the dollars that we receive from timber management, and those lands would then also become available for public recreation. Right now, the bulk of those lands are, have plantations, Norway pine plantations, a little mix of aspen mixed in, and they do create a nice connection between the tax forfeited lands along County 24 and to the north, up along the west side of Bad Axe Lake, and west over towards Skunk Lake.
Mark, with the pictures that are up here now, when you talk about the Lessard Sam's not liking trails, in a sense, I can obviously see some trails in each of these parcels. Are they're existing trails, so is that going to be an issue, or?
The existing trails, as long as we don't designate them for, like ATV trail or a designated snowmobile trail,
Okay.
we're fine. I mean, if we continue to use those for access, for timber management, that's okay. They just don't want to see them become designated recreation trails for, say, like a snowmobile trail or an ATV trail.
Okay, okay.
What are they used as now?
Right now, because it's private land, they're private forest roads used for accessing the timberlands. I think most of those lands have been leased for hunting purposes. So they are currently being used for hunting access as well. But, we would probably, they would still be open and available for public use, but not for any designated use.
I got
So,
a-
go ahead, Tom.
On the map here, you see that it says proposed Heartland Trail connection,
Right.
and that kind of does swing over into a different 40-acre patch. Are you going to reroute that then if we get this westernmost 40 acres?
Well, the idea is that westernmost 40 would need to be purchased either using county funds or some other means. So it's not Lessard Sam's dollars.
Yeah, but you look at the route of the proposed, you know, you got the dotted alternate, but then you got the green. That slips over into a more eastern 40.
Right, and that's why I'm saying everything west of that snowmobile trail,
Including the trail.
the proposed Itasca Heartland Trail. The solid line is the actual proposed trail. One of the problems that we ran into is when we had originally drafted this route, the trail to the north of Jasmine Drive, where the trail continues north, was potlatch land at that time. That has now been purchased by a private individual who intends to use that as a potential gravel pit. So that's why I'm showing that there's the alternate route that goes to the west. And again, yes, it does go through an existing gravel pit. In talking with that individual, he said that he would consider an easement along the western boundary of that 20 acres for the trail.
So if we did not accept this, would it still then retain in private ownership because the acquisition would not go through? Or what happens if we do not accept this?
Well, my guess is that the DNR would probably end up picking it up then, if the county were not to pick it up.
So you said all of this land currently is in private ownership? So
Correct.
is this
It's-
a done deal that the private ownership has signed agreements that they're selling their property?
Yes, this is owned by the Conservation Fund, which was former potlatch land. Their intent is to take all of those potlatch lands, or as many as possible, and sell them or turn them over to either county, state, or federal tribal ownerships to maintain those as working forests, rather than having them split up and parcelized into private ownership. They see the value in having a working forest rather than having it turned into private forest, where those forest lands typically don't get managed. They are held for hunting purposes, or they're split up into smaller and smaller pieces. And that's less access for public recreation and less access for our forest products economy.
So did I misunderstand you? Because I thought you said that these currently are privately owned, but they're not.
They are privately owned. The Conservation Fund is a private organization.
Okay, but it's like a 501c3.
Yes.
It's different than if
Right.
I owned them.
Right, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I think Tom's question was where that proposed trail is. So you're saying you would exclude everything, including to the west, including the proposed trail?
Right, yes.
Now, the only problem with that, what if they need to move that proposed trail further east? You're out of luck.
Yeah, and all I'm trying to do is find a connection from the trail that goes from Emmaville north up to Jasmine Drive. And I think once we get up to Jasmine Drive, we can snake around that, there is a bit of a hill right on Jasmine Drive there. That would be tough to get the trail back onto the tax forfeited land. But that's the easiest route that I see to continue that trail. And that 20-acre gravel pit south of Jasmine Drive is our only other issue that we have to deal with from that point on. It's all public lands up to Itasca State Park.
So what if you excluded the 80 acres to the west instead of just the 40? I mean, how difficult would that make the process?
Chip, are you showing the 40 and then that sliver of the next 40 as being acquired by different funds?
Right, yes.
So it's not the whole, I mean, he's showing everything west of the solid line needing
Right.
to be acquired
Yes.
through other funds?
That's in pink.
So
crosshatched pink.
it's the 40 and then that sliver. is what he's saying we would have to find additional
That's where
funding
I
for.
was a little
Yep, no, that's,
confused Okay.
So then, are you proposing we purchase all this, or this is being given?
This would be purchased by the Trust for Public Lands using Lassard Sam's dollars.
Yep,
They would then donate it to Hubbard County,
yeah, except for that portion.
except for that west of that solid line there.
So
And
maybe I'm not understanding the process correctly, but I do have a concern, and maybe it doesn't apply here, but I'm just gonna explain and then you can. So, I'm having trouble with organizations coming in and buying large plots of land for the purpose of conservation, not from the standpoint that I'm against conservation, but we tend to push out more and more private ownership. And so, my concern is, are we pushing out private ownership, or is this already a done deal, so private ownership's already been pushed out? So our option is to accept this, or for the DNR basically to accept it, right?
I think that's probably your options. There are parcels that the Conservation Fund purchased from Potlatch that both the DNR and us have looked at and said, we have no interest in those. I mean, those are parcels that are, not adjoining existing public lands. They're isolated. They don't really fit into our management plan. There are parcels that are going to be turned over to private. They'll be sold to private ownership. These kind of parcels, when you have a large block like this that connects existing public lands, are parcels that we look at. One, it conserves, large blocks of land for public hunting. Right now, these are not available for public recreation. They're for the most part, they're private lands. They're leased for private hunting and not open for, public use. The other thing is that it does provide insured management of those forest lands. If they get turned over to public, I'm not saying that public or the private sector does not manage their forest lands, but it's much less likely that they manage their forest lands than from a public agency.
So then, my question to the board is, if we accept this, and I understand it's free, are we interested in selling less desirable pieces that we have so that the private ownership doesn't get just pushed out? They still have options. Because I see value in both.
I was gonna mention to Chip that, start identifying some lands that can be sold. Especially if this special legislation gets approved, so we can use, because this is a good fit right now, I believe. But there's other tracts of land that would be nice to get into private ownership.
And we don't need
Right.
all of this land.
As a general conversation, those potlatch lands were bought by the Conservation Fund
Yeah.
several years ago throughout a lot of northwest Minnesota, or in northeast Minnesota. And right now, the reason why it makes more sense for the county to own it than for the state to own it is local control. And it's still for the simple purpose, we wouldn't be getting the pill payments on it, but the revenue relative to timber management would likely offset that. As a general conversation, I think everybody's in agreement that we want to look for opportunities to sell off parcels that have a higher value for development and a lower value for conservation or timber management.
The one problem I have with all of this is, whether it's a conservation fund or some other environmental organization purchasing these lands, number one, we have no control over that. And once it's done, once we accept those lands with the funding mechanisms that they're using, it can never go back to private.
And we're restricted on how we can use them.
So you can see over time, even if we spun off the tax forfeited land that we couldn't spin off to private ownership, if this trend continues over a long period of time, the county will have a whole bunch of land that it's managing and can manage and do timber sales on, but can do nothing else with. You can't turn it back to private, and you can see how, over a long period of time, a lot of private property could be absorbed. And I don't think that puts a county in a real good position with tax capacity over the long, long haul. So you really have to be careful about some of this stuff, because at some point, you know, right now, we have plenty of tax forfeited land that we can probably balance some of these things out. But what about 30 years from now? Is that balance gonna get tipped upside down, that we're sitting here with no tax forfeited land to put back into private, and we're sitting with a third of our county land all tied up and no way to generate tax revenue?
I know there's other counties that, Beltrami County to the north of us, that struggle with that, having such a large percentage of tax forfeited and public lands.
And I don't know what the answer to it is, because we don't have control over who a private property owner sells their property to, nor should we. But this is kind of a state issue that the state better get a grip on pretty soon over the next decade, or I could see in some counties it becoming a big problem. You know, but I agree with Tom that, you know, I want to protect the ability to use the land for the recreational purposes we can identify, which Chip has done here. As long as you're comfortable with that 40 acres being able to accomplish that goal, and there's plenty of options, you know, doing nothing isn't the answer, I don't think either, because the same result's gonna happen. The county might as well get the benefit of the timber harvest off the property.
And,
Then
and
nothing.
and eliminate the headache of the DNR
Yeah,
managing
and
those
dealing with
lands. That's probably the most compelling
Yeah.
reason is.
But it's, long-term, it's kind of scary where it could be going, and I think that's the end around that these environmental entities are doing to accomplish their goals. And it's basically kind of shutting out the government, local government entities from really having a say in it.
I
Very
mentioned,
limited anyhow.
I mentioned several times, I would have much preferred to see all this land stay with Potlatch.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I haven't worked for a large landowner, private landowner, paper company. They're good managers of the land. I mean, they manage it for profit, no doubt about it. But I know the company I worked for, I mean, we used to have, you know, like for every, it wasn't even required, but we on our own said that we're gonna have buffer strips, you know, along rivers and streams and even along roads, main roads, they had buffer strips. It wasn't required back then when we were doing it.
And it's coming from every direction. It's coming from the One Watershed, One Plans, it's coming from the Trust for Public, or not the Trust, but the Conservation Fund, and other, Lassard Sams and other entities are all playing this game to acquire these properties. And for good reason many times. I mean, I'm not arguing about the rationale, but their rationale and their objectives versus the county objectives can be two different things. Our number one job, as Jeff has always mentioned to me, is protecting tax capacity. It slowly erodes it.
So I would be really interested in knowing in the amount of land that, including this, if we acquire this, how many acres does the county own that we can do nothing with, that's tied up into agreements? I mean, we can do timber management, but that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Versus how much land do we have that we're free to make decisions over? And I'm not asking you to give me that today, but that would be information I
It's a
think would
rough
be
guess.
helpful.
I mean, we got quite a bit of tax forfeited land that the county directly controls.
Yeah, totally, we have 138,000 acres of tax forfeited land. How much of that is available to the public with public access is an issue. We have several landlocked blocks that, you know, yes, we can get access for forest management, but the general public can't get in there for hunting or other forms of recreation. Those are the parcels that we would be looking at.
Yeah. And besides access issues, out of all that tax forfeit land, how much of it is actually ignoring the access issues and those things, how much of that is saleable to the public if you chose to? Virtually all 138 acres, correct?
Yes.
You
I mean,
just
we
can't
can
do-
sell all of,
Nobody's gonna be interested if there's not access, I get that part, but so. so
unless,
we're in a pretty
unless
good
you're an
position.
adjoining landowner.
Yeah,
Or if you want to go through the condemnation process and have the township force a cartway. I mean, there is that avenue as well, but townships, of course, don't like doing that either, so.
so our county is actually in a pretty good position to withstand these things longer than any other county.
And it serves a major economic factor in Hubbard County, which is tourism. You know, if all of these 40s were split up into 20s and sold off privately and they were all posted, that would change the nature of Hubbard County.
Right, and I don't want people to get me wrong here, it's not that anybody's opposed to the environmental benefit, because it makes sense and things to protect watersheds and things like that, but there's a balancing act, and if you get it tipped over, you've got a whole nother set of problems you're gonna create. So you have to really be cognizant of those things when these things happen.
You look, and Commissioner Kruger said it first, is you look at this section and it makes sense. It seems like this is the first best use because it's connecting between county lands and other county lands. And you look and you see there are no lakes there. There's no real developable, there's no roads, there's no access, there's nothing that requires service. And as Chip mentioned, when they go in to do timber harvesting with this, they manage that on their own. They create the roads they need. They do what they have to do with it. And they don't require any services from us to do that. So in this case, this makes a lot of sense. And the general conversation about watching that balance and having that conversation also makes sense.
Chip, I got a couple of questions. One, the narrow strip of, looks like a long 40, just around the letters of number 34, that privately owned or?
Yes.
Okay, and second question is, and so we're just looking at this roughly 600 acres right here at this point. Do you have an idea what kind of revenue we could get from timber harvesting? Currently, I looked up last night, it looks like we're getting about almost $6,400 in property tax that would be distributed between the county, townships, and school districts.
What I've done is I took a look at what our revenues over all of our tax forfeited lands were last year, or, yeah, I guess it is last year, no, 2021. And spread that over our 138,000 acres, we're getting about almost $12 an acre for forest management on our tax forfeited lands, which is pretty comparable to what Potlatch was paying in property taxes. Now, being that Potlatch, for the most part, got rid of their low production lands early, what they had left when the Conservation Fund purchased those lands was their higher quality lands that are predominantly all in Norway pine. Norway pine, you're gonna get a lot more revenue off of, number one, because you can get intermediate cuts out of it. So you can have 3/4 innings in there before you do your final harvest. So you've got intermediate income sources throughout the entire rotation of that land. So you're going to have a higher revenue, per acre revenue off of those acres over the course of, the next 60 years than you would if it was, a lot of our normal tax forfeited lands, providing, of course, timber revenues, timber markets stay stable or improve. So your per dollar or per acre revenue is likely higher just on timber revenue than you would off of your property taxes for rural vacant land.
Is that per acre, you calculate an annual amount over all of our acreage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Will it be part of your forest management plan to put these kind of lands back into Norway pine?
Yes.
So the $12 per acre goes directly to the county, there's no benefit to the townships or the school district?
There is in the fact that because we just commingle the dollars between these lands and our tax forfeited dollars, when we apportion at the end of the year, they get their apportionment. Technically, we would not have to. Those dollars could remain strictly, if we decided that we wanted to keep those separate, any of the dollars that we make off of those could be kept separate and kept in the general fund. But, then you have to keep track of which ones are tax forfeited, which ones are county fee lands, and you have to keep those dollars separate. Just creates another accounting nightmare.
So is it safe to say then, when the county acquires land and we manage it, that every unit of government, receives pretty close to probably its funding, versus with PILT, the only one who really does is the county?
Right.
That's probably in a nutshell the argument of why it's better for us to have it than the DNR to have
Yeah,
it.
Yep.
And then going,
DNR purchased that or acquired that, then the county would get PILT dollars on it because it's county acquired, or state acquired land, but you wouldn't get the timber revenues from it.
and then you said there's always the option of the 138,000 acres that the county currently has. We can sell some of those, even without the special legislation,
Right.
and if we ever had the need to do something like that. But I agree with Tom, if we could start to identify, if you haven't already, some of these parcels that could, we hopefully get that legislation this year and put them up, because I'd like to see that.
Mr. Chair, maybe that would be later in the spring a good topic for the work session.
Okay.
Mark could bring some information on that.
And at very least, I think, to start identifying those things, so we're trying to be as close to dollar value per dollar value, versus acreage phrase. I'm more interested in the dollar value per dollar value, but, we have that special legislation before that, you don't wanna get too eager right away.
Yeah. And I'd have to wait a year or so, but
We can certainly start doing the homework and identifying.
yeah.
And that would also help, at least me, for decisions to be made maybe in the future.
Yeah, because here we're looking at, well, in essence, it's 14, or 13 40s and 2 20s, equaling about 600 acres. But if we, the county, were to look at dispersing some of our lands, we probably wouldn't be looking at a big 600 acre chunk. We'd be looking at the straight 20, 40, 80s, maybe.
Right.
Maybe even a little bit more that's not connected to anything, and,
Which would make it more affordable for a private person to
Yeah.
buy.
yeah.
And
Okay.
probably located in a situation where they're more valuable per acre. And as Commissioner De La Hunt said, we're looking at dollar value rather than acre per acre comparison. Look at something that's marketable. You don't want to create private ownership in a situation where eventually somebody's going to have the responsibility of providing access. Some of this makes a lot of sense, because if we bundle up all the public lands, then we don't necessarily have to worry about providing access.
If your goal is to get it into private hands and increase tax capacity, you want development to occur on
Yep.
those things.
So put it where development makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
And that's one thing, when you look at lands like this, they never get developed, so we don't get that increased tax capacity. The cabin or the residence or even a garage or whatever that maybe would increase the property tax value of the place. Dan, do you have anything to add?
I do not. I think that we, as a board, have formulated a plan. This spring, just get some more information, and we can dissect it more later on at maybe a work session. I think it was great discussion.
Thank you.
Probably looking for a motion, Mr. Chair, right?
I was just gonna say.
I would move to approve, as long as it excludes that 40 acres to the west, including the existing snowmobile trail.
So 40 plus, whatever that is.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Next item on the agenda is a similar situation where the Crow Wing Watershed District, Soil and Water Conservation District is looking at acquiring 2 parcels of conservation fund lands. One is just north of Camakota Lake along Highway 64, in between some tax forfeited lands and adjoining the Cabacona River. And the second parcel is down in Akeley, adjoining, I guess there's next to the Giziibii Creek. Again, both of these are owned by the Conservation Fund, and they are looking at acquiring those, would again donate those to the county. We would not receive PILT dollars on those, but we would have, would receive the timber dollars. And it does provide some public access for, to existing tax forfeited lands and some connectivity for habitat, so.
So this would be restricted.
Pardon?
This land would be restricted again.
Right, again, in the parcel in Hendrickson Township does have a minimum maintenance township road that runs through the south, kind of the southeast corner of it, and then runs up along the east edge. That trail, because it's township road, would remain open. Township maintains that, we don't. The access road that goes through kind of the middle of that parcel in Hendrickson Township, again, would remain open, but, you know, certainly would not be used for anything other than just timber management and hunting access.
Now, the 80 here in Hendrickson Township is predominantly Norway,
Predominantly, yes, yeah.
and it's, I thought we talked about it, or you wrote, I read somewhere that it's, could be due for a thinning soon?
It appears that it's probably pretty close to thinning
Okay, so we could receive some revenue on this one in the short term.
very soon, yes.
Thank you. And then how about the one down by Akeley? That's, doesn't look like pines, it's,
There's a pine plantation right on the north, along the township road.
okay, I see it.
And I took a look at that. That's probably about, I would say, maybe 5 years or so away from its first thinning. The remainder of that parcel, that block of land is a mixture of aspen and hardwoods, northern, excuse me, northern hardwoods. Predominantly, you know, I would say all of it is 25 years or less in age. So that's, you know, that's probably another 20, 25 years before any kind of management would be done in there.
And then this is part of the Leech Lake One Watershed, One Plan to try to increase the acreage of forest lands for water protection.
Right, and again, between Leech Lake and the Crow Wing, One Watershed, One Plan, whenever that gets started and developed, both of these parcels were on their list of lands that protect the adjoining water bodies, the creeks and the streams, and henceforth, you know, provides that cold water protection for the Cisco, which is what they're trying to do, so.
Any further discussion?
And so the ownership of this would be the Crow Wing SWCD? Who would own this in the end?
Hubbard County. They
So
would
if-
purchase and donate to Hubbard County.
So if we didn't accept this, then it goes to the DNR, question mark?
Probably.
They get you coming or going, don't they?
It just keeps coming.
Back into a corner.
Yeah,
You can see.
There's 10,000 acres of conservation fund land in Hubbard County that is going to be, you're gonna see this over and over and over
That's why
again.
we really need that special legislation to get passed.
Right.
We can be prepared for it.
and just to note, you know, the One Watershed, One Plans are funded by taxpayer dollars. And so one of their goals is to buy up property to protect streams but at the same time, it's taking out private ownership.
That's the flip side I was talking about. I mean, you could go hog wild and go singularly focused about protecting the environment to the point where you go to an extreme that you actually cause a lot of damage to
Yeah.
taxpayers.
Yeah.
And people don't see that connection because it's a slow, methodical, long process. But it happens one piece at a time.
Yeah.
And if you're not aware of it, next thing you know, you go, what happened?
And I don't know if we have 10,000 acres to put up for public sale
Yeah.
to compensate.
And we have zero control over that because you have these entities coming in and buying these properties. And then they're the ones conveying them to, whatever other entity they do with all these restrictions on them that go in perpetuity. So it's just like,
I think the long-term study about the ownership of property and the restriction of the properties, I think is really useful, and I think it would be helpful to see the big picture. I don't disagree with what you're saying, and yet these are not really developable and marketable properties. They're not gonna be valued and developed for development like that. Over the last 5 years, on average, we've had a 5% increase in our tax capacity, and a quarter of that has come from new construction, which is improvements to building or new building, and 3/4 of that is coming from value adjustments because the market is just growing. All of those things require that tension and the balance between development and conservation, right? And and Hubbard County is relatively unique in the situation with a couple of other counties in the state where we have that tension is really, really kind of balanced. But I think it would really help to see the overall picture and identify those spaces. One of the nice things about identifying these large blocks of publicly owned land where there currently aren't any services means we don't have to expand and provide services there. So in the most extreme case in Cook County, where 91% of the property in the county is owned by public, mostly by the forest or by U.S. Forest Service in the state, people argue they're not paying any taxes. Well, there's absolutely no services required. So the payment in lieu of taxes that's coming in for that is actually almost free money because the tax capacity is only calculated on the 9% that is taxable, right? And that's not necessarily being eroded, especially when we have in every one of these conversations a discussion about the no net loss policy and identify that our ownership of these lands is probably better for us from a control perspective and at least a push relative to the tax perspective. But I understand why I would even want to look at it and see the large map and say, okay, well, here's all these items of things that we own that have value, or here's places where development makes more sense, where it can be, if you're a builder, it makes sense where things would happen. And I think the worst thing that could happen would for these 40s to be sold off and sold to private, and each one marked, no trespassing, no hunting. I think that would really change the nature. But not seeing it all in one big picture means every time we have to have this conversation, it's a good conversation.
BlackRock this last year bought up 1/4 of the houses that were for sale around the United States. I disagree with you somewhat, Jeff, when you say, I think it would not be beneficial to have these 40 sold off privately, because I think private ownership is very important. And so, looking at it from a conservation standpoint, it makes sense to me, but the reason BlackRock acquired 1/4 of all the houses for sale this last year was because they went in and they offered prices that the average person couldn't afford. And that's my concern here, is we don't have control over who buys, is like you said. But the big picture is, there's a much bigger, long end game here. And so for every decision we make, And it's really frustrating to know that if we don't accept this, then it just
Yeah.
goes to the DNR or whatever, and local control is much better, I get that. But the whole philosophy of it is what concerns me.
You just really have to watch out for incrementalism, because it's pretty soon, 10, 20 years down the line, you go, what happened? Well, every little piece said, oh, okay, and then, oops. But some of these are perfectly appropriate for what they're trying to do. So you just gotta be aware.
So does anybody want to make a motion?
Don't you feel like you've
Yeah,
got
I know.
your hands shackled behind your back and?
I'm still having trouble with the goals of the one watershed, one plans, because
Yeah.
all this ties together.
Damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the state keeps saying we need more money, more money, more money.
My only thought is that, say, 20, 30 years down the road, and we do have control of this, if somehow the legislation changes where we're allowed to do more on these parcels, will Sarge Sam's always be in control?
Then you would get into constitutional issues of unjust takings and things like that, because once it's sold and once it's established, I don't know that you can undo that stuff very easily anyhow. Or would you even want to?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll reluctantly second it, because I
But they
think local
are.
control is better.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Reluctantly,
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Next is the administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have the one item needing a motion or approval this today is the designation of the county newspaper for 2022. We did receive 2 bids. You have a copy of a tab sheet that shows the comparison of those 2 tabulations. Northwoods Press put in a base rate charge to the county of $3 per column inch. Park Rapids Enterprise put in a base rate of $3.85 per column inch. Then each were asked to calculate that based on a sample publication relative to a couple of sample publications and a couple of different types of publications. And you can see that the typical charge for the Northwoods Press would be $24.75, and the typical charge for the Park Rapids Enterprise would be $20.21. Now, the reason that works out differently, as I can tell, is that Northwoods is specifying an 8-point Helvetica font, and Park Rapids Enterprise is specifying a 7-point Helvetica font. So while the Northwoods Press says that first sample is 8 column inches, the Park Rapids Press is saying it's 5.
I would like discussion to take place amongst the board. For the last several years, we have given this to the Park Rapids Enterprise. And both of these are located within Hubbard County. Excuse me. And I do feel it's important that we support all small business in Hubbard County as best we can. And the prices are close enough, and when Jeff explained the difference between the 8 and the 7 point. Would the board find it, I'm not sure what word I want to use. Would the board be supportive, even though it looks on paper like it's more, but maybe it's the same or less, to give to Northwoods Press because we are supporting more than one small business and giving small businesses different, both chances.
I'm also curious about these other rates that are published here. Like, lowest classified rate paid by commercial users. There's a big difference there. How often do we use these other rates?
That's typically, that's kind of the rack rate, as I understand it, for the newspaper, what their advertised rate is, and then the next item is the discount that they're giving to us and what they're selling us that space for. So I would, if I were guessing and I were understanding and analyzing that, I would think that the Northwoods Press is selling $8 because they're a single unit and they have this much distribution, and that's the value that people will pay for it. Whereas Forum Communications and Park Rapids Enterprise has a larger distribution and bigger perceived value. So relative to the notices that we print, if we're only printing, if we chose the Northwoods Press and we only printed the Northwoods Press, we would not print that much in the Park Rapids Enterprise relative to other things. But, so we would choose one or the other for our official notices. I did call and ask this morning, our Jobs HQ and our advertising ads fall outside of this and are priced separately and are independent of what our choice is relative to our official county newspaper. So that really doesn't have anything. We would not get the same result. Sometimes we post jobs in both the newspapers, and that's by choice because we want to saturate the market, but we would probably never post in the Northwoods Press and not post in the Park Rapids Enterprise and the Jobs HQ through Forum Communications relative to jobs. We just wouldn't get enough distribution of our ads. So that's separate from this, and I just wanted to make that point clear as I understand it. It's really, 24, I'm just trying to think how to do this. It's roughly a 20% increase. Just if we just look at the 2475 versus the 2021. And a 20% increase on our roughly $25,000 worth of printing notices would be $5,000.
However, are you taking into consideration the 8 and the 7 point? Or would that have nothing to do with this particular?
I'm not, because that's, as far as I understand, that's their publication standard. So the $3 versus the $3.85 is a calculation. The 2475 versus the 2021 is the number that I would pull out and identify as being the comparative number.
Okay, thank you.
And Dan, I think I interrupted you earlier.
You know, in listening to the conversation, and especially from Commissioner Shar, I think it's very important to support all businesses within the county there. And I agree with you, Shar, if you're indicating or leaning towards any publication paper.
And I'll correct myself. It's, if I just do that calculation based off that, it's not $5,000, it's $3,500 more than the 25. I'm showing 25,000 calculation of that ratio, and then 28,450.
Thank you, Jeff.
So in a nutshell, one's obviously 15-20% lower than the other. So how are you going to justify not taking the lowest price? In the past, one has been higher than the other, and we've justified taking the higher price because the circulation was higher. But in this case, how do you justify taking the higher price when the circulation is lower?
sharing.
Is that a worthy reason?
I think it certainly is, Commissioner Delahunt. I look at the fact that we are a small community, and we obviously want to work together with each and every business. And I agree with Ted and Shar on that, that we need to change it up.
You know, I guess I look at it a little differently, being on the other end of the spectrum. If I was a business person and I was putting in a bid for these things, if you want the business, put in a good bid. Put in a competitive bid.
Do we, question came up about the number of times these were published. So we're basically charged every time a notice is published. So if one newspaper publishes a notice 2 times a week, are we being charged twice where the other newspaper might publish it once?
Well, that's something that we have to specify. We need to specify that if this needs to be published twice over a 2-week period, that we would only publish it, we would only pay to publish it on twice in that 2-week period. We need to be more specific with that. I mean, $25,000 to $35,000 depending on the year, and, you know, it's really hard to compare 2020 and 2021. I go back to 2019, and I think we had $26,000 of expenditures with foreign communications. And I didn't get a chance to split out how much of that was the job-related stuff and how much of that was the required notices. So on $20,000, I'm doing everything I can, and we're working with AMC in every way that we can to minimize the amount of things that we have to put in the paper, because we know that even with the distribution, it's not the primary source of information for a lot of people anymore. So we're moving things to the county website when we can. We're printing summaries when we can. We're already taking advantage of those, but we would certainly not want to publish things more often than we need to. So we will be very clear about that.
Well, I can make a comment, I guess. I am a bit disappointed to see the Northwich Press be that much higher, because I was thinking on the whole idea of sharing, you know, to let another newspaper get it, but I don't know why they chose to go that much higher, because, and the other one is lower price plus higher circulation, so. As much as I was wanting to go with sharing, I think I almost got to change my thought on that.
So, Jeff, would you explain, so am I comparing apples to apples here? Am I looking at the second publication? Northwoods Press said the typical charge would be $66, and the Park Rapids Enterprise is saying it would be $20.
63.
No, $20 if chosen for the legal, and $63 if not chosen. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not entirely sure where that calculation came from.
Oh, yeah, I got
So basically, the 2475 and the 2021, that's apples to apples, and the 66
As
and
I
the
understand it,
2021 is
as I
apples to
understand it
apples.
by reading the bids that they put in and
Yeah.
the description of the formatting and the size.
Okay, thank you.
We have a responsibility to our taxpayer to spend their money wisely. And I think the Park Rapids Enterprise bid is superior. You know, I was all set, like I said, all set to switch and share.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tom. I mean, I'd love to spread the joy around and stuff. It's a bridge too far when the differences are too large that I don't know how you can make that connection to justify going with the higher bid. I would make a motion to approve the enterprise.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 I'll vote aye also because of the 20%.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Administrators update, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay, the only two updates I have are very kind of just out there. The deadline for the first round of ARP applications and the first round of revision has come and gone, and we've gotten quite a number of applications. And I will summarize those and get those to the committee and schedule a meeting in the next couple of weeks so we can take a look at them and get a feel for what's in there. Relative to the capital planning committee, we approved moving forward with ICS to do a building inventory for us, and we would be touching base after the first of the year. So as soon as I know more about that, we'll schedule that ad hoc committee to go forward. Again, a reminder, if you have comments or notes relative to the committee assignments and the structure and the format of that, please feel free to forward them. We'll add them to the agenda for next week for the work session. As I look at the work session agenda for next weekend, I added committee list to the top of that. We talked about having a data practices open meeting law review with Attorney Frieden. We have the DNR coming to discuss additional about that land acquisition on Plantagenet relative on the north end and the marshy areas we brought forward. It's never going to stop. We do have a public health update with Marley, and then, as Gina mentioned, we'll be talking about the policy review relative to the emergency temporary standards. Hopefully, we have more information next week. That's what I have on the agenda, and it looks like a full agenda for a work session.
Jeff, are you thinking the ARPA funds would possibly be on the February work session for the board to look at?
We could certainly put them on the February work session. We could have the committee do their work in time to hand off a summary or recommendations or whatever is appropriate at that point in time.
Is there a significant amount?
I haven't even tabulated. You know what I can do as soon as I summarize and tabulate, I can just share that with all the board, and then we'll schedule the meeting with the committee. I think it's important for people to know if we've got $3.1 million left to allocate, to understand what the demand is right now.
And if I remember correctly, even though the committee's gonna give a recommendation, the board would like to see every.
Our policy says the board's gonna make the final review. Yep.
All right, thank you. Next, committee reports. Guess we'll start over with Tom.
Well, actually, there wasn't much happening since our last board meeting, so I don't have anything this time.
Okay, thank you. Shar?
I was out of town, so.
Okay, David?
I think with the holidays too, there really wasn't.
We
Just
had Heritage.
scanning real quick. Yeah, we did have the Heritage meeting. Prior to that, I had a Northwest Emergency Communication Board meeting. I think I talked about that at the last meeting though, but at Heritage, we just went over the decision of the county board, and I know had a lengthy conversation about it. Trying to put people at ease with a little bit about that. And I know, did you get over, Jeff, to talk to the staff?
I did go Wednesday and speak with the staff and provided an update of what we knew. And it was really a continuation of the October meeting when I went to visit with them.
Yep. So that's all I have.
Okay.
Committees.
Dan, do you have any committee reports?
I do not, of any relevance, continuing on with the committees that I serve, but I just wanted to mention, I believe it's on January 11th, 6 PM is the city ordinance with City of Park Rapids. Is that correct, Shar?
Let me look at my calendar for the date for sure.
I
Yes,
think
the public hearing is January 11th at City Hall.
So I encourage fellow commissioners to attend. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I think 6, but I'm not
And
sure.
I myself didn't have any committees between our last meeting and today.
Mr. Chair, one other meeting to note that I would add is the Hubbard County Township Association, January 31st. I'll
Is
be,
it the 31st now? I thought it was the third Monday. I have it down for the 17th.
I have an email from Theora that says January the 31st.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can confirm with her.
At White Oak?
It was at White Oak, they're also considering Zoom. But as we didn't have anyone at the last one, I want to make sure, I know that we have elements related to highway 5-year planning and local road improvement programs that we certainly want to take some time to present some county topics to the Township Association. So I will clarify that and I'll add it to the agenda and let you guys know when I get clarification. But yeah, it's typically been a Monday, and the third Monday would be the 17th, so if she's showing the fifth Monday,
Yeah,
which is the 31st, that might not,
Okay. Yeah, I had the 17th on my calendar.
17th is a holiday.
Martin Luther.
17th is a holiday, maybe that's why it's been adjusted.
Oh, that could be, okay.
Makes sense.
Okay, you'll let us know then.
I will clarify that and forward the announcement.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, I'll get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Good job.
And I'll remember though, when I was chair of the planning commission, the first meeting went well, and then the second one, the wheels fell off. So I was more worried.
Don't worry about the next one when you have a chance to think about it.
At least it'll be a work session.